Welcome to Programming for Designers. This is Trish Ladd, WIP400, Platt College. Integrating PHP and MySQL. Sometimes people pronounce it SQL or SQL. It stands for Structured Query Language. SQL is a standard computer language for relational database management and data manipulation. It is used to query, insert, update, delete, and modify data. Most relational databases support SQL, which is an added benefit for database administrators, as they are often required to support databases across several different platforms. What this means for you is that if you understand the principles of MySQL, you can use that same knowledge in other databases that may use a different syntax, but also use a structured query language. For example, Access or Microsoft SQL utilizes a structured query language. And based off of my knowledge of MySQL, I was able to create a custom query for a client. The only difference was the syntax. So here are our basic SQL commands. SQL can do more than these things, but these are what we will be learning. So the basic commands: select, insert, update, and delete. I mentioned this earlier. I called it CRUD. Create is the insert command. Select is the read command. Update, and delete. This is about manipulating the values of our database, not the structure. Select allows you to retrieve information from your database for display. It is the read part of CRUD. This is the select statement that Tika was talking about. You can see that it is very direct and gets all of the product names from the products table. You can filter data from a statement using the where phrase. The where phrase works on selects, updates, and deletes. It is important to note that MySQL compares values with the single equal rather than the double equal. We will discuss each of the commands in details in the days to come, but select will be the statement we go over the most. Tonight we will be doing some selects, and selects are what you will use 90% of the time, since that is what the public will see, data that is read from the database. You would only want administrators and people maintaining the site to be able to make new entries, updates, or deletes to the database. Insert allows you to add new rows of data to a table. You can see the basic syntax here. Where is not needed here because we are creating new data. Update allows us to edit rows of data that already are in the database. And you can see its basic syntax here. Knowing which row of data to update by its ID is the easiest way to grab the specified data targeted for updating, but you will need to use the where phrase, or all of the records in the table will be updated to the new information that you have set. Same thing with the delete. Knowing which row to delete by its ID is the easiest way to grab the specified data targeted for deletion. If the where phrase is not specified, you will delete all of the rows of data. No bueno. As I mentioned before, the where condition applies to select, update, and delete, and this comparison allows you to restrict or filter the records of data that you are working on. This could be for data that you are displaying, this could be data that you plan to update, even data that you want to delete. There are a number of ways to compare data in order to get the rows of data that you want, and only the rows of data that you want, for reading, for updating, and for deleting. Since you will be displaying data, it's a good idea to have control over what order in which the data comes out. You can do that with order by and limit. One of the great things about PHP is that it works very well with MySQL. There is pre-built-in support for MySQL and functions that you can run from PHP that will connect you to your database, allowing you to execute commands directly to the database without having to go through a third party like PHPMyAdmin. You are creating the third-party plugin for the database. And this is how you do it. We connect the site to a database with a database user. Users is a common term for people who use something. In our case, our users table stores the list of people that are going to use our site. We could change this name to something like members to make it less confusing. But the database will always have a database user, and that user is authorized to specific transactions. We will get to that again in a moment. Basically, we create an authorized user on the specific database that we want to connect them to. And when we add this user, here are our privileges, those specific transactions that I talked about. So what commands is this user allowed to do? For example, in the data area that you can see in the lower left-hand side of the video, you can see that we have select, insert, update, delete, and file all checked. This means that these are the commands that this user is allowed to do. Same thing with the structure, create, alter, delete, index, drop. We can use PHP to do any of these commands, but we're not going to alter the structure. It might just be smartest to remove that functionality if we don't plan to use it. By removing grant and super, you ensure that this user has only a connection to this specific database rather than access to all of your databases. Now we can connect that user to the database via a PHP file in order to allow it to execute the commands specified with our PHP. Once we have connected to the database, we are authorized to execute commands on the database. We execute those commands by using the query function, as seen here. The result in this case would be an object that returns all of the rows of data in an associative array. So when we write a query and we get a result, if we find that there was at least one row, we can have it echo out all of the data from that row or multiple rows of data. Else we can say, hey, we got nothing. And we can do additional things to catch if there are any errors in our query, because sometimes you return no results because there is an error. After running the query, we can go through each row of data with the fetch assoc. This fetches one row of data at a time, turning it into an array, which then we can turn around and display each piece of data. Loops are how we get data out of arrays with JavaScript and with WordPress. If you recall, if have posts while have posts basically says as long as we have posts, keep echoing out the data until there are no more posts. The beautiful thing about the conditional statement in the while loop here is that row will become null when there are no more rows of data, and that will immediately stop the while loop from executing. Once you're done with your query and you've finished the while loop, you will want to set the results free. And what this allows you to do is to reuse the result variable. It will also tell the server to take the result variable out of its memory so that it can be reused. Here's an example. Our DB config PHP page has our database connection, and if we require that, or even better yet, require once that, it will automatically be included on this page. The include for our header would probably just be the start of the HTML and the start of our page, and then the query inside basically says get all of the data from posts. So this is going to select every field and every row, every column, and every row of data. So if there is more than title or body, that may not be the most efficient select statement, but it is an easy one to write. So we get rows of data. If there are more rows of data, that numRows is a property of our result telling us how many rows of data that there are. So if there are at least one row of data, while out all of the data, then free the results. If there are no rows of data, echo no results to show. End the page, and we're done. In summary, SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and it uses specific commands to control data. The where phrase allows us to get data with specificity, and there are additional ways to focus and limit data, such as order by or limit. There is integrated PHP support for MySQL so that we can use PHP pages to ping the database, get data back, and have that data displayed or manipulated. Database users are how we can use PHP to issue authorized SQL commands to the database. Once we have an authorized user that is allowed to do things like create data or update data or delete data, then we can use that database user to do those commands. And we can use PHP to issue those commands for us. When we get results back, we can make sure that we have results and therefore then turn around and echo out those results or display some kind of alternate data. Once done with the query, then we can free the server, reuse the results, and query variable. So with PHP and MySQL, we can create many robust web applications. As always, I hope this lecture has been informative and helpful, and I wish you happy coding.